Good day, everyone. So we will be discussing in human body, which is the urinary system. Okay, so we are your reporters. I am Ellery Similiano together with my two partners, Raven Somoza and Charlene Ruiz. Okay, so what is urinary system? So the urinary system, also known as the urinary tract or renal system, and it consists of the kidneys, bladder, and urethra. So the purpose of the urinary system is to eliminate waste from our body, regulate blood volume and blood pressure, and control levels of electrolytes and metabolites, and regulate blood pH. Okay, so of course, our urinary system filters extra water and waste product from the blood to help maintain proper fluid balance inside our body. Parts and functions of the urinary system. So our urinary system consists of two kidneys, two ureters, the bladder, and urethra. So our kidney regulate blood volume and composition, regulate pH, and produce hormones and excrete waste. The ureters transport urine from kidney to urinary bladder, and the urinary bladder store urine and expels through urethra, and through urethra it is a discharge urine from our body. Okay, so of course our kidney is a regulation of ions in blood, regulation of blood volume, so they adjust the volume of blood or eliminating in the urine, and it is a production of hormones and excrete of waste. And the bladder, it is a place where urine is stored, and the ureters, it is a tubes that transfer the urine to the bladder, and the urethra, it transfers urine from the bladder to the outside of our body. Okay. So our kidneys are found in the upper abdomen on each side of the spine. So our kidney is like a fist-sized organs filter waste products out of the bloodstream and produce water. So as you can see in the picture, your inferior vena cava or the right kidney is the largest vein in the body. So the blood from lower part of the body returns to the heart in the vein. So it is the main vein to heart, so it carries filtered blood from kidneys to body. And your abdominal aorta, your left kidney, this artery carries blood from the heart to the rest of the body. So it is the main artery from heart. So it carries blood from heart to kidneys. Okay, so the differences between the inferior vena cava or the right kidney and your abdominal aorta or your left kidney is your aorta is the main artery of the body, while the two main veins of the body are superior and inferior vena cava. Hence, aorta carries oxygenated blood throughout the body, starting from the left ventricle of the heart, while vena cava drains the oxygenated blood from the body to the right ventricle of the heart. Okay, let's proceed to the internal structure of the kidney. So each kidney is enclosed in a renal capsule which is surrounded by adipose tissue. So internally, the kidneys consist of the renal cortex, renal medulla, renal pyramids, renal columns, major and minor calyces, and renal pelvis. So the blood enters the kidney through the renal artery and leaves through the renal vein. Okay, so internally, our kidney has three regions: an outer cortex, a medulla in the middle, and the renal pelvis in the region called the hilum of the kidney. So the hilum is the concave part of the bean shape where blood vessels and nerves enter and exit to the kidney. So it is also the point of exit for the ureters. The renal cortex is granular due to the presence of nephrons. So nephrons, it is the functional unit of the kidney. So the medulla consists of multiple pyramidal tissue masses called the renal pyramids. So in between the pyramids are spaces called renal columns through which the blood vessels pass. So the tips of the pyramids are called renal papillae, a point toward the renal pelvis. So there are on average 8 renal pyramids in each kidney. So the renal pyramids along with the adjoining cortical region are called the lobes of the kidney. So the renal pelvis leads to the ureter on the outside of the kidney. So on the inside of the kidney, the renal pelvis branches out into 2 or 3 extensions called the major calyces, which further branch into the minor calyces. So the ureters are urine-bearing tubes that exit the kidney and empty into the urinary bladder. Okay, so the question is, what is circulation? Is when blood flows through the kidneys. So the renal circulation supplies the blood to the kidneys via the renal arteries, the left and right, which branch directly from the abdominal aorta. So the renal blood circulation can be defined as the blood supply of the kidney from our body. So the kidney receives blood from the body, then performs the critical function of excretion. So the renal blood flow is under tight regulation to achieve proper filtration and excretion of the waste. So how the kidney works? So your renal artery, which is the blood, waste, and water enter the kidney through renal artery. So your blood with waste products. And this large blood vessel branches into smaller and smaller blood vessels until the blood reaches the nephrons. So in nephron, the blood is filtered by the tiny blood vessels of the glomeruli and then flows out of the kidney through the renal veins. So through our renal vein, it is a clean blood, so the filtered blood. The renal veins are blood vessels that return blood to the heart from the kidney. And your ureter are urine-bearing tubes that exit the kidney and empty into the urinary bladder, or it is a waste products or the urine to the bladder.
Nephrons. Nephrons are the functional units of the kidney. It forms urine by the process of filtration, reabsorption, and secretion. Reabsorption is the return of substances that were removed from the filtration back to the bloodstream. Each nephron contains a glomerulus, a cluster of capillaries surrounded by a cup-shaped membrane called the Bowman's capsule. It uses concentration gradients to remove nitrogenous waste and salts from the blood vessels that pass through it. Urochrome, the pigment that gives urine its normal yellow, amber, or straw color. The color of urine can be influenced by normal factors such as the amount of liquid consumed and can also be changed by diseases and medication. How the nephron produces urine and recovers substances the body still needs. The glomerular capsule or Bowman's capsule surrounds the glomerulus, which is a network of capillaries. A tubule exits from the back of the glomerular capsule and continues along thin tube with 4 areas: the proximal convoluted tubule, the loop of Henle, the distal convoluted tubule, and the collecting duct. The collecting duct leads into the renal pelvis. Blood vessels which supply the tubule. The renal artery supplies the kidney and branches many times. Each nephron is supplied by a single afferent arteriole which enters a Bowman's capsule and then divides to become the network of capillaries that makes up the glomerulus. So diya sa network of capillaries, diya may tabo ang filtration sa blood. After filtering the blood, the capillaries rejoin to become the efferent arteriole. This divides again into the peritubular capillaries, another capillary network that surrounds the proximal and distal tubules in the cortex. The peritubular capillaries remove water, ions, and nutrients which are reabsorbed by the proximal and distal tubules. After this, the efferent arterioles meet with efferent venules, flowing ultimately into the renal vein. Note that the filtrate, which is katong na filter gikan sa blood, is not urine. The filtrate only becomes urine in the collecting ducts because urine is formed through 3 renal processes. So the 3 renal processes. The first one is the glomerular filtration. Water and solutes smaller than the proteins are forced through the capillary walls and pores of the glomerular capsule into the renal tubule. Glomerular filtration, as just described, the glomerulus acts as a filter. Glomerular filtration is a non-selective, passive process in which fluid passes from the blood into the glomerular capsule, part of the renal tubule. Once in the capsule, the fluid is called filtrate, and it's essentially blood plasma without blood proteins. Both proteins and blood cells are normally too large to pass through the filtration membrane, and when either of these appear in the urine, naay high chance nga naay problema sa mismong glomerular filters nimo. The next one is the tubular reabsorption. Returns water and needed solutes back to the blood capillaries. Tubular reabsorption begins as soon as the filtrate enters the proximal convoluted tubule. The tubule cells are transporters, taking up needed substances from the filtrate and then passing them out their posterior aspect into the extracellular space, from which they are absorbed into the peritubular capillary blood. The final process is tubular secretion. It removes other substances from the blood into the tubule to be excreted. Can be performed whether by passive diffusion or active transport. Tubular secretion is essentially tubular absorption in reverse. Some substances such as hydrogen and potassium ions and creatinine is also moved from the blood of the peritubular capillaries through the tubule cells or from the tubule cells themselves into the filtrate to be eliminated in urine. This process seems to be important for getting rid of substances not already in the filtrate, such as certain drugs, excess potassium, or as an additional means for controlling blood pH.
So next are the ureters. The ureters, about 28 to 34 cm in length, are the two tubes that actively convey urine from the kidneys to the urinary bladder. They begin on each side at the narrow outlet of the renal pelvis on a level with the first lumbar vertebra. Each ureter is retroperitoneal and courses medialward into the pelvis until it reaches the lateral angle of the bladder. It then runs obliquely for about 2 cm through the bladder wall and opens at the lateral angles of the trigone. Because of its oblique course through the bladder wall, the ends of the tube close, acting as valves when the bladder is full, thus preventing backflow of urine. In the female, the ureters are in close proximity to the ovaries and cervix of the uterus, and in the male, to the seminal vesicles and near the prostate gland. Each ureter is composed of 3 layers of tissues: a mucous lining, a muscular middle layer, and a fibrous outer layer. The muscular layer is composed of smooth muscles which propels the urine by peristalsis. The rate and strength of peristalsis increase with increasing urine volume. Moving on to the urinary bladder. The urinary bladder is a smooth, collapsible muscular sac that stores urine temporarily. It is located retroperitoneally in the pelvis, just posterior to the pubic symphysis. If the interior of the bladder is scanned, 3 openings are seen: the 2 ureter openings, or the urethral orifices, and the single opening of the urethra, the internal urethral orifice, which drains the bladder. The smooth triangular region of the bladder base outlined by these 3 openings is called the trigone. The trigone is important clinically because infections tend to persist in this region. In males, the prostate gland surrounds the neck of the bladder,
where it empties into the urethra. The bladder wall contains three layers of smooth muscles, collectively called the detrusor muscle, and its mucosa is a special type of epithelium, transitional epithelium. Both of these structural features make the bladder uniquely suited for its function of urine storage. When the bladder is empty, it is collapsed, 5 to 7.5 cm or 2 to 3 inches long at most, and its walls are thick and thrown into folds. As urine accumulates, the bladder expands and rises superiorly in the abdominal cavity. Its muscular wall stretches and the transitional epithelial layers thins, increasing its volume and allowing the bladder to store more urine without substantially increasing its internal pressure. A moderately full bladder is about 12.5 cm or 5 inches long and holds about 500 ml of urine, but it is capable of holding more than twice that amount. When the bladder is really distended or stretches by urine, it becomes firm and pear-shaped and may be felt just above the pubic symphysis. Urine is formed continuously by the kidneys, but it is usually stored in the bladder until its release is convenient. And lastly, the urethra. The urethra is a thin-walled tube that carries urine by peristalsis from the bladder to the outside of the body. At the bladder-urethra junction, a thickening of the smooth muscle forms the internal urethral sphincter, an involuntary sphincter that keeps the urethra closed when urine is not being passed. A second sphincter, the external urethral sphincter, is fashioned by skeletal muscle as the urethra passes through the pelvic floor. This sphincter is voluntarily controlled. The length and relative function of the urethra differs in the two sexes. In women, it is about 3 to 4 cm or 1.5 inch long, and its external orifice or opening lies anteriorly to the vaginal opening. Its function is to conduct urine to the body exterior. The male urethra, on the other hand, extends along a widening path for about 20 cm or 7.9 inches. The male urethra passes through the center of the prostate gland just after leaving the bladder. Within the prostate, it is joined by two ejaculatory ducts. After leaving the prostate, the urethra extends down, forward, then up to enter the base of the penis. It then travels through the center of the penis and ends as a urinary meet the tip of the penis. Because the male urethra is joined by the ejaculatory ducts, it serves as a pathway for semen, fluid or fluid containing sperm, as it is ejaculated off the body through the penis. Thus, we can say that the male urethra is a part of two different systems: the urinary system, when it is used to void urine, and the reproductive system, when it is used to ejaculate semen. Urine is prevented from mixing with semen during ejaculation by reflex closure of sphincter muscles guarding the bladder's opening. The female urethral tract is separate from the lower reproductive tract or vagina, which lies just behind the urethra. And that is all for our part. Thank you so much for listening. Merry Christmas and have a Happy New Year.